1940. Britain stands alone. France has fallen. The British Expeditionary Force barely escaped at Dunkirk. The Battle of Britain rages in the skies over southern England. The Luftwaffe is trying to break the Royal Air Force, to achieve air superiority, to make invasion possible. Spitfires and Hurricanes are fighting brilliantly, just barely holding the line. But they're taking losses. Heavy losses. Production can't keep up with attrition. Britain needs more fighters. Desperately. Immediately. The British Purchasing Commission has an office in New York. They're scouring American aircraft manufacturers, looking for anything that can help. They approach Curtiss about ordering P-40 Tomahawks. Decent fighters, reliable, but with significant limitations. The Allison V-1710 engine only performs well at low altitude. Above 15,000 feet, it loses power. In a war where altitude is life, that's a critical flaw. But Britain has no choice. They need aircraft. Any aircraft. The Commission also approaches North American Aviation. NAEA is a smaller company based in California, primarily building trainers and light aircraft. They've never designed a fighter plane. But when the British ask if NWA can build P-40s under license, NWA's president, James Dutch Kindleberger, makes a counter-proposal. Give us 120 days, and we'll design you something better. This is audacious. Insane, even. The British need aircraft now. They don't have time for an experimental design. Fighter development takes years. But Kindleberger insists. He has an ace in the hole. A brilliant engineer named Edgar Schmude. German-born, emigrated to America, worked for Fokker before joining NWA. Schmude has been studying fighter design, particularly German aircraft, and he believes he can create something revolutionary. Fast, maneuverable, with long range. And he can do it quickly because he's going to use existing components. The Allison V-1710 engine, the P-40's gear and wheels, proven systems, assembled in a completely new airframe, designed from scratch, using the latest aerodynamic principles. The British are skeptical, but desperate. They agree. Contract signed April 10th, 1940. 120 days to first flight. It's an impossible deadline. The industry standard is 2 to 3 years from design to prototype. Schmude assembles a small team. They work around the clock. The design comes together fast. Low-drag, laminar flow wing, a radical innovation that reduces air resistance dramatically. Smooth skin with flush rivets, belly-mounted radiator with a clever design that actually produces thrust from the cooling air. Sleek fuselage. Teardrop canopy for excellent visibility. Everything optimized for speed and range. 102 days later, 18 days ahead of schedule, the prototype is complete. The NA-73X. Workers roll it out of the hangar in Inglewood, California. It's beautiful, elegant, looks fast even sitting still. October 26th, 1940. Test pilot Vance Breese takes it up. The aircraft handles beautifully, fast, responsive, stable. The performance tests are stunning. It's faster than the P-40 by a significant margin, climbs better, has better range. NAA has done it. In just over 3 months, they've designed and built a world-class fighter. The British name it Mustang. The P-51 designation comes later when the Americans adopt it. The RAF orders 620 aircraft. Production begins immediately. By April 1941, the first Mustangs are shipping to Britain. And then the war reveals the flaw. A critical, crippling flaw that almost kills the entire program. The Allison V-1710 engine, excellent at low altitude, is terrible at high altitude. Above 15,000 feet, it loses power dramatically. The Mustang is blindingly fast at low altitude, 370 mph, making it one of the fastest fighters in the world down low. But most air combat in Europe happens at 20,000 feet and above. Up there, the Mustang struggles. It's outperformed by German Bf-109s and FW-190s. It's slower than Spitfires. It's basically useless for high-altitude fighter sweeps and bomber escort. The RAF relegates the Mustang to low-altitude roles: tactical reconnaissance, ground attack, close air support. It excels at these missions. The low-altitude speed and long range make it perfect for darting across the Channel, photographing German positions and racing back before the Luftwaffe can react. But these aren't strategic roles. The Mustang isn't changing the war. It's just another tactical aircraft in a war that's increasingly about strategic bombing. The Americans are starting to need that strategic solution desperately. By late 1942, the United States Army Air Forces are trying to execute a daylight precision bombing campaign against Germany. The theory is beautiful. Fly in tight formations, use the combined firepower of dozens of heavy bombers to fend off fighters, hit German war production with surgical strikes. The reality is a bloodbath. German fighters tear apart unescorted bomber formations. Loss rates climb. Missions to targets deep in Germany become suicide runs. The strategic bombing campaign is failing. The Americans need a solution. They need a fighter that can escort bombers all the way to targets deep in Germany. The P-47 Thunderbolt is excellent, but has limited range. The P-38 Lightning has good range, theoretically, but is plagued with high-altitude engine problems in the cold European air, and is in short supply. Neither can reliably escort bombers to targets like Berlin, Stuttgart, Munich. Neither can stay with the bombers for the entire mission. The Mustang has the range. The airframe is perfect. The fuel capacity is exceptional. Internal fuel load of 184 gallons, more than most fighters. With external drop tanks, it can carry even more. But the engine holds it back. The Allison V1710 isn't going to work for high-altitude escort. The Mustang is so close to being the perfect solution, but close doesn't win wars. And then, in April 1942, a test pilot named Ronnie Harker of the RAF makes a suggestion that will change everything. After flying a Mustang, he writes in his report, "This aircraft would be exceptional at altitude if fitted with a Merlin engine." March 4th, 1944. Berlin. The heart of the Third Reich. The city that Hermann Göring himself promised would never be bombed, declaring, "If an enemy bomber reaches the Ruhr, my name is Meyer." A city that's been struck by RAF bombers at night, but never faced a major daylight raid. Never seen American heavy bombers in broad daylight. Never witnessed the silver specks of B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators streaming across the sky in massive formations. Until today. The air raid sirens wail across the German capital. Citizens scramble for shelters. Flak guns rotate skyward, crews scrambling to their positions. Luftwaffe fighters take off from airfields around the city, climbing fast, hunting for the American bombers everyone knows are coming. This is routine now. The Americans bomb during the day. The British bomb at night. Germany endures. The Luftwaffe intercepts. The bombers take losses. Many losses. Unsustainable losses when they venture this deep without escort. Except today is different. Today, something impossible is about to happen. The Luftwaffe pilots climb through 12,000 feet, 15,000, 20,000. They scan the sky. There, the bombers. Hundreds of them. Flying in tight combat box formations, bristling with .50 caliber machine guns. The German pilots check their fuel. calculate their attack runs, prepare to dive on the bombers, rip them apart with cannon fire, peel away before the defensive guns can track them. This is their city, their sky, their fight. And then they see something that shouldn't exist, something that violates everything they know about fighter range, about physics, about what's possible with a single-engine aircraft. Small, sleek shapes flying alongside the bombers. Not above them, not below them, right there, at 25,000 feet, 600 miles from their base in England, in the heart of Germany, over Berlin, American fighter planes, P-51 Mustangs. The Luftwaffe pilots freeze. This is impossible. Single-engine fighters can't fly this far. The Americans have P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings, good aircraft, but their range maxes out at the German border. By the time American bombers reach Berlin, they're alone, vulnerable, easy prey. That's how it's always been. That's how it has to be. Physics doesn't lie. Fuel capacity doesn't lie. Single-engine fighters cannot escort bombers to Berlin and back. Except they can. They just did. And the Luftwaffe's entire defensive strategy, built on the certainty that deep penetration raids would be unescorted, has just become obsolete. One German pilot radios his commander, reports what he's seeing. The response: "That's impossible. There are no long-range fighters over Germany." He insists. More pilots confirm. The reports climb the chain of command, eventually reach Hermann Göring, Reichsmarschall, commander of the Luftwaffe. The man who promised Berlin would never be bombed. The man whose entire air defense system was predicated on the impossibility of long-range fighter escort. Göring reportedly says, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the war was lost." He's right. The war isn't over yet. There's more than a year of brutal fighting ahead. Millions more will die. Cities will burn. But strategically, in this moment, when American fighters appear over Berlin for the first time, the outcome becomes inevitable. Germany cannot win an air war where American bombers can strike anywhere, anytime, with fighter protection. Cannot win when their factories, their refineries, their transportation networks, their cities are vulnerable to round-the-clock bombardment. Cannot win when the Luftwaffe is forced to fight defensive battles over their own territory. Bleeding pilots, an aircraft in a war of attrition they cannot afford. The appearance of P-51 Mustangs over Berlin in March 1944 is more than just a tactical development. It's a strategic earthquake. It's the moment when the impossible becomes real. When American industrial might, engineering ingenuity, and sheer determination combine to produce a weapon that changes the entire calculus of the war. A single-engine fighter that can fly 1,600 miles with drop tanks, that can match or exceed any German fighter in speed, climb rate, and maneuverability, that can fight at 30,000 feet, that costs less than half what a German Me-262 jet fighter costs. That's being produced by the thousands, while German production collapses under Allied bombing. This is the story of the P-51 Mustang. Not just the technical specs or the combat record. The story of how what the Germans called impossible became routine. How a fighter plane designed by Americans, but originally ordered by desperate British, saved the entire strategic bombing campaign. How a last-minute engine swap transformed a mediocre low-altitude fighter into the best piston-engine fighter of World War II. How papier-mâché drop tanks, literally cardboard impregnated with resin, made the impossible possible. This is the story of how one aircraft saved 30,000 American bomber crew lives. How it crippled the Luftwaffe. How it made D-Day possible by achieving air superiority. how it proved that with the right combination of design, engineering, and industrial capacity, America could build something that defeated Nazi Germany's best engineers, their best pilots, their best aircraft. This is the story of the aircraft that Hermann Göring feared more than any other. The aircraft that made him realize the war was lost. The P-51 Mustang. And it begins not with glory, but with desperation. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the power plant that made the Spitfire a legend, a 60-degree V12, liquid-cooled, supercharged, producing over 1,400 horsepower in its latest variants. Critically, it has a two-stage, two-speed supercharger that maintains power at high altitude. Above 20,000 feet, where the Allison dies, the Merlin sings. It's the best high-altitude piston engine in the world. Harker's suggestion reaches the right people at the right time. Both the RAF and the USAAF are interested. Rolls-Royce can't produce enough Merlins for both Spitfires and a new Mustang variant. But Packard Motor Company in Detroit has been building Merlins under license for Lend-Lease aircraft. They can provide engines. The question is whether the installation will work. Whether putting a Merlin in a Mustang will actually deliver the promised performance, or just create an expensive experiment that flies poorly. October 1942. The first Merlin-powered Mustang takes flight. The XP-51B. Everyone holds their breath during the test flight. This is the moment of truth. Either this works, and the Allies get the long-range escort fighter they desperately need, or it doesn't, and back to the drawing board. The test pilot lands, climbs out. His report is unequivocal. This is the best fighter he's ever flown. The performance numbers back him up. The XP-51B climbs to 20,000 feet in 5.9 minutes, compared to 9.1 minutes for the Allison-powered version. Top speed increases from 390 mph to 440 mph. Service ceiling jumps from 32,000 feet to over 42,000 feet. The aircraft is faster, climbs better, and performs brilliantly at high altitude. With drop tanks, the range exceeds 1,600 miles, 1,600 miles. From England to Berlin is 1,100 miles round trip. The XP-51B can do it, easily, with fuel to spare for combat. This is it. This is the aircraft that will save the strategic bombing campaign. General Hap Arnold, commanding the USAF, sees the test reports and immediately orders production ramped up. By spring 1943, P-51Bs and P-51Cs, built at a new factory in Dallas, are rolling off production lines by the hundreds, then thousands. North American aviation goes into overdrive. Multiple shifts. Maximized production. Getting these aircraft to Europe is the highest priority. November 1943. The first P-51B Mustangs arrive in England. They're assigned to the 354th Fighter Group, officially part of the 9th Air Force, Tactical Air Support. But the 8th Air Force, the Strategic Bombing Command, immediately requests them for escort duty. They're too valuable, too capable, too desperately needed to be used for anything but bomber escort. December 5th, 1943. The 354th flies its first bomber escort mission. Target: Amiens, France. The mission is a success. The Mustangs prove they can do the job. More missions follow. December 11th to Emden, December 13th to Kiel, each mission the Mustangs go deeper into German territory. Each mission, bomber losses drop when the Mustangs are present. January 11th, 1944. A mission that becomes legendary. Major James Howard, commanding a squadron of the 354th, is escorting B-17s to Oschersleben, deep in Germany. The bomber formation comes under massive attack from German fighters. Howard's squadron is supposed to stay with the bombers, but Howard sees a particular group of B-17s being torn apart. He breaks formation, attacks alone. For 30 minutes, he fights off German fighters single-handedly, shooting some down, driving others away, forcing them to focus on him instead of the bombers. His Mustang takes hits. Guns jam. Doesn't matter. He keeps fighting, keeps protecting those bombers. The bomber crews report a lone P-51 taking on the entire Luftwaffe. Howard's actions save the formation. He's awarded the Medal of Honor, the only fighter pilot in the European theatre to receive it for aerial combat. His action demonstrates what one Mustang can do, what one determined pilot in the right aircraft can accomplish. By February 1944, more fighter groups are converting to Mustangs. The 4th Fighter Group, elite pilots, many of them former RAF Eagle Squadron members who transferred to the USAAF, gets P-51s on February 28th. They're operational the next day, March 1st, barely 24 hours, to familiarize themselves with a completely new aircraft. Some pilots get less than an hour of checkout time before flying combat missions. It doesn't matter. They need these planes. Need them now. March 4th, 1944. The mission to Berlin. The 4th Fighter Group escorts B-17s and B-24s to the German capital. 1,100 miles round trip. The first time single-engine fighters have made this journey. The first time American bombers strike Berlin, with fighter protection all the way there and all the way back. The Luftwaffe tries to intercept. The Mustangs shoot down 17 German fighters. The bombers drop their loads and return safely. Mission accomplished. The psychological impact is massive. For the Allies, it's vindication. Proof that the strategic bombing campaign can work. Proof that with proper fighter escort, the bombers can hit any target in Germany. Morale soars. For the Germans, it's devastating. Their entire defensive strategy was built on the assumption that deep penetration raids would be unescorted. They positioned their fighters to wait until the American escorts had to turn back, then pounced on the vulnerable bombers. Now there's no safe zone. No point where the bombers are unprotected. The Mustangs can go everywhere. March 5th. The 4th Fighter Group escorts bombers almost to Spain, testing the range, proving the capability. March 6th. Back to Berlin. More German fighters destroyed, more bombers saved. The missions continue. Berlin, Munich, Stuttgart, Vienna. Targets that were once almost suicidal are now routine, and the production keeps ramping up. Thousands of P-51s. More variants. The P-51D arrives in summer 1944 with a bubble canopy for even better visibility, 650 caliber machine guns instead of 4, improved systems. It's faster, tougher, more capable than the B model. Production exceeds hundreds per month. By the end of 1944, 14 of the 15 fighter groups in the 8th Air Force fly Mustangs. The aircraft has become ubiquitous over Europe. But the story of how this happened, how a single-engine fighter achieved this impossible range, that's where the engineering brilliance really shows. Let's talk about range. Why is it so hard for single-engine fighters to fly long distances? It's simple physics. Fuel capacity versus engine consumption. A fighter needs a powerful engine to perform, to climb fast, fly fast, fight effectively. Powerful engines consume fuel quickly. The more fuel you carry, the heavier you are. The heavier you are, the more fuel you burn. It's a vicious cycle. The P-47 Thunderbolt, for example, is powered by a massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine, producing 2,000 horsepower. It's fast. It's tough. It climbs like a rocket. But it guzzles fuel. Even with internal fuel capacity of 305 gallons, its combat radius is only about 475 miles. With external drop tanks, you can push it to maybe 600 miles. Not enough to reach Berlin from England. The P-38 Lightning has 2 Allison engines. More power. Good speed. Theoretically good range because of its twin-engine efficiency. But it has problems. The engines run hot. They struggle at high altitude in the cold European climate. Reliability issues plague the early models. And it's complex. 2 engines mean double the maintenance, double the potential failure points. The P-38 can theoretically reach Berlin, but in practice, it's not reliable enough to serve as the primary escort fighter. The Mustang solves these problems through brilliant engineering. Start with the airframe. The laminar flow wing design reduces drag dramatically. Less drag means less power needed to maintain speed. Less power needed means less fuel consumption. The smooth skin with flush rivets minimizes turbulence. Every detail is optimized for aerodynamic efficiency. The Mustang slips through the air with less resistance than any contemporary fighter. The Merlin engine is powerful, 1,490 horsepower in the P-51D, but relatively fuel efficient for its power output. The 2-stage supercharger means it doesn't have to work as hard at altitude. It can maintain performance while consuming less fuel than comparable engines. It's beautifully matched to the airframe. Internal fuel capacity is generous. The P-51D carries 184 gallons internally. That's split between fuselage tanks. But the real breakthrough is the drop tank system. External tanks that can be jettisoned when empty or when entering combat. The Mustang can carry 2 110-gallon drop tanks under the wings, plus a 75-gallon tank on the centerline under the fuselage. Total external fuel, 295 gallons, combined with internal fuel, 479 gallons total. That's more fuel than many twin-engine aircraft carry. Here's where it gets interesting. The drop tanks aren't metal, they're paper mache, literally, cardboard impregnated with resin. They're called paper tanks, and they're brilliant. Light, cheap, disposable. A metal drop tank weighs maybe 60 pounds empty. A paper tank weighs 20 pounds. That weight savings means the aircraft can carry more fuel for the same takeoff weight, or carry the same fuel and be lighter, which improves performance and range. The paper tanks are manufactured quickly and cheaply. If they're shot up or damaged, no big loss. Drop them and get new ones. They're stockpiled by the thousands at bases across England. A Mustang takes off with 2 paper drop tanks, flies on them as far as possible, then switches to internal fuel when the tanks are empty or when combat is imminent. If Germans appear, the pilot pulls a lever and the tanks fall away. The Mustang is suddenly much lighter, more maneuverable, ready to fight. This system gives the P-51D a combat radius of over 750 miles. With careful fuel management, it can stretch beyond 1,000 miles. That's enough to escort bombers from England to any target in Germany, to Berlin, to Munich, to the Czech border, anywhere, and still have enough fuel to fight on the way home. But there's more to the Mustang's success than just range. It's also a superb fighter. Speed, 437 at 25,000 feet. That's faster than the German Bf-109 G6, 398 mph, and competitive with the FW-190 A8, 408 mph. The Mustang can catch anything the Luftwaffe puts in the air. Climb rate, excellent. The P-51D reaches 20,000 feet in about 7 minutes. Service ceiling, 41,900 feet. It can fight anywhere the Germans can. Maneuverability, outstanding. The Mustang turns tightly, rolls quickly, responds precisely to control inputs. German pilots who fought against Mustangs respected them, feared them. The Mustang could outturn a Bf-109, outdive an FW-190, outrun everything. In a one-on-one dogfight at medium or high altitude, the Mustang wins against any German fighter. Period. Armament: 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns in the P-51D, 1,880 rounds total, 400 per inboard gun, 270 per outboard gun. The 50s are reliable, hard-hitting, with good range. Convergence is typically set for 300 yards. When a Mustang opens fire, the target dies. The firepower is devastating, adequate for shooting down fighters, enough to damage bombers, capable of strafing ground targets effectively. Durability: the Mustang is tough. Not as tough as the P-47, which is basically a flying tank, but tough enough. The engine is liquid-cooled, which means a hit to the cooling system can be fatal. But the airframe itself is rugged. Pilots bring Mustangs home with massive battle damage, wings shredded by flak, tail sections shot away. One pilot lands with half his wing missing, the skin peeled back, the internal structure exposed. The Mustang keeps flying. Visibility: the bubble canopy on the P-51D is revolutionary. 360-degree vision. You can see everything. Above, below, behind. No blind spots. In air combat, seeing the enemy first is half the battle. The Mustang pilot sees first. That's a massive advantage. German pilots in Bf-109s have limited rear visibility. The Mustang pilot can track them the entire time, can anticipate their moves, can stay behind them and hammer them with machine gun fire until they go down. And cost: a P-51D cost about $51,000 to produce. That's cheap. A P-47 costs $83,000. A P-38 costs $120,000. A B-17 bomber costs $238,000. The Mustang is affordable. America can produce them in massive quantities without breaking the bank. By war's end, over 15,000 Mustangs will be built. That's industrial might. That's what wins wars. Not just good design, mass production of good design. So you combine all these factors: range, speed, maneuverability, firepower, visibility, durability, cost, and you get an aircraft that's simply the best piston engine fighter of World War II. Not just in one category. Across the board. The Germans know it. The Japanese know it. Allied bomber crews know it and love it. They call the Mustangs their little friends. When they see the distinctive silhouette of a P-51 formation flying escort, they relax, because those little friends will keep them safe. But having the best aircraft doesn't automatically win battles. You need tactics, you need strategy, you need pilots, and you need a command structure that uses these assets correctly. Early 1944, General James Doolittle takes command of the 8th Air Force. Doolittle is famous, led the raid on Tokyo in April 1942, one of the most daring missions of the war. He's aggressive, he's innovative, and he makes a crucial decision that transforms how the Mustangs are used. Before Doolittle, the doctrine is close escort. Fighters stay with the bombers. Tight formation. Maximum protection. Don't leave the bomber's side. It makes sense defensively. But it's reactive. It forces the fighters to wait for the Germans to attack, then respond. The Germans choose when and where to engage. They can mass forces, hit vulnerable bombers, then disengage before the escorts can react effectively. Doolittle changes this. He encourages the Mustang pilots to leave the bombers, to fly ahead, to hunt aggressively, to sweep entire areas clear of German fighters before the bombers even arrive. And when the bombers are attacked, the Mustangs are to pursue relentlessly. Chase the Germans back to their airfields if necessary, shoot them down on takeoff or landing, destroy them on the ground. Don't just defend. Attack. Achieve air supremacy. This is revolutionary. It changes fighter tactics from defensive to offensive. The bomber crews initially complain. Where are our escorts? Why are the fighters leaving us? But the results speak for themselves. German fighters are intercepted before they can mass for coordinated attacks. They're forced to fight Mustangs instead of targeting bombers. They're hunted back to their bases and destroyed. The Luftwaffe starts losing fighters at an unsustainable rate, and as German fighter numbers decline, bomber losses plummet. The math is stark. Before the P-51's arrival, bomber loss rates on deep penetration missions are often 20% or higher. That's unsustainable. At that rate, the entire bomber force would be destroyed within months. After the P-51 arrives and Doolittle changes tactics, loss rates drop to 3.5% or lower. That's manageable. That's sustainable. The bombers can keep flying, keep hitting targets, keep degrading German war production. And the psychological impact on the Luftwaffe is devastating. German pilots are increasingly demoralized. They're outnumbered. They're outperformed. Every mission is a desperate fight for survival against overwhelming odds. Experienced pilots are killed or grounded by injuries. Replacements are poorly trained. Flight training time for German pilots drops from hundreds of hours in 1940 to less than 100 hours by 1944. These green pilots stand no chance against veteran American pilots in superior aircraft. The Luftwaffe tries various tactics to counter the Mustangs. They form Sturmgruppen, heavily armoured F-190s designed to absorb punishment while closing on bombers to point-blank range for devastating cannon attacks. These Sturmgruppen are escorted by regular Bf-109 units, whose sole job is to keep Mustangs away from the F-190s long enough for them to attack. It's a clever tactic, in theory. In practice, it fails. The Sturmgruppen formations are unwieldy. They take too long to assemble. They're not maneuverable. The Mustangs simply avoid the escorts, go around them, hit the Sturmgruppen before they can reach the bombers. Or the Mustangs engage the escorts, tie them up, let other Mustang groups rip apart the Sturmgruppen. The heavily armoured FW-190s are death traps, too slow to evade, too heavy to manoeuvre. They become easy kills. The tactic is abandoned. The Germans try hit-and-run attacks, dive on the bombers from high altitude, make one pass, dive away at maximum speed before the Mustangs can react. Sometimes this works, but it's not sustainable. You can't cripple a bomber formation with one pass. You need coordinated attacks, sustained pressure. And sustained pressure means fighting through the Mustangs, which means dying. The Germans even throw their Me-262 jets into the fight. The Me-262 is revolutionary. The world's first operational jet fighter. Fast, well-armed, deadly. But it's introduced too late, in too small numbers, with too many teething problems. And crucially, it's vulnerable during takeoff and landing when it's slow. Mustang pilots learn to patrol near Me-262 bases, wait for the jets to land, then pounce when they're most vulnerable. The Me-262 is a technological marvel but not a game changer. There aren't enough of them. And against hundreds of Mustangs flown by skilled pilots, even jet speed isn't enough. By summer 1944, the Allies achieve air superiority over Western Europe. By fall, it's air supremacy. The Luftwaffe is still fighting, still dangerous, but increasingly irrelevant. They can't stop the bombers, can't stop the Mustangs, can't prevent the systematic destruction of German industry. Oil refineries, ball-bearing factories, aircraft plants, transportation networks. Everything is targeted. Everything is hit. The German war economy begins to collapse, and D-Day becomes possible. June 6th, 1944, the invasion of Normandy, the largest amphibious invasion in history. It succeeds partly because the Allies have achieved air dominance. German reinforcements can't move during the day. They're attacked by fighters, P-51s, P-47s, Typhoons. Anything that moves on French roads is destroyed. The Luftwaffe can't interfere. They're too depleted, too disorganized, too overwhelmed. The invasion succeeds. Allied armies pour into France. The liberation of Europe begins, and none of this happens without the P-51 Mustang, without its impossible range, without its combat performance, without the thousands of aircraft that made air supremacy possible. This one aircraft, this supposedly impossible achievement of engineering, enabled everything that followed: the destruction of German industry, the success of D-Day, the advance across France, the final defeat of Nazi Germany. Let's talk about the pilots, because the Mustang is just a machine, a brilliant machine, but useless without skilled pilots flying it. The Americans who climb into those cockpits are young, very young. Most are in their early 20s. Many are still teenagers. They've completed flight training in the States, maybe 200 hours total flight time if they're lucky. Then they're shipped to England, assigned to a fighter group, given a Mustang, and maybe a few hours to familiarize themselves with it. And then they're flying combat missions over Germany. It's terrifying, exhilarating, overwhelming. The first few missions are pure survival, learning not to get killed, not to panic, not to freeze when the shooting starts. If you make it through your first 5 missions, your survival odds improve dramatically. You've learned the basics: how to fly formation, how to scan the sky constantly, how to react when bounced by German fighters, how to aim, lead the target, squeeze the trigger in short, controlled bursts. Some pilots are naturals. They take to combat like they were born for it. They get kills quickly, become aces, 5 or more confirmed victories. Their names become legendary. Men like Chuck Yeager, who'll later break the sound barrier. Don Blakesley, who commands the 4th Fighter Group. George Preddy, who shoots down 26.83 enemy aircraft before being killed by friendly fire. John Meyer. Clarence Bud Anderson. These men are killers, in the best sense. They're protecting bombers, destroying enemy fighters, winning the air war. But most pilots aren't aces. Most are just trying to survive, trying to complete their tour, typically 50 missions, and go home. They fly. They fight when they have to. They follow orders. They hope. Some make it. Many don't. The 8th Air Force loses about 2,500 fighter pilots killed or missing during the war. That's out of maybe 15,000 who serve. About 1 in 6. Those are better odds than bomber crews, but still brutal. What's it like? Flying a Mustang on an escort mission? Let's walk through it. You wake up early, maybe 4 a.m., briefing at 5 a.m. You file into the briefing room with your squadron. Maps on the wall. Target marked. Route in, route out. Expected enemy opposition. Weather. Radio frequencies. The intelligence officer gives you everything you need to know. Usually ends with, "And good luck, gentlemen." You'll need it. Breakfast. Eggs and coffee. You eat because you don't know when you'll eat again. The mission might last 7 hours. You're flying in a cramped cockpit at high altitude. No bathroom, no food. Just you and the aircraft and the mission. You suit up. Heated flight suit because it's going to be minus 40 degrees at altitude. Leather jacket. Mae West life preserver. Parachute. Leather helmet. Oxygen mask. Gloves. You're carrying maybe 50 pounds of gear. You waddle out to the flight line where your Mustang waits. The ground crew has been working all night, fueling, arming, checking systems. Your aircraft is ready. You do your walk around. Check the control surfaces. Check the propeller. Check the drop tanks. Everything looks good. You climb in, settle into the cockpit. The ground crew helps you strap in. Shoulder harness, lap belt, parachute connected. You're locked in. Can't get out quickly if something goes wrong. Engine start. The Merlin coughs, sputters, roars to life. The propeller blurs. The whole aircraft vibrates. You run through your checks. Oil pressure, fuel pressure, hydraulics, radio, guns. Everything is functioning. You signal the ground crew. Taxi to the runway. Your squadron assembles. 16 Mustangs. You're number 3 in your flight. Wingman to the flight leader. Takeoff. Throttle forward. The Mustang accelerates. Tail comes up. You're light. Fuel tanks are full. Aircraft is heavy, but the Merlin has power to spare. The runway rushes past. You pull back gently. The wheels leave the ground. Gear up. Flaps up. Climbing. You form up with your flight. 4 aircraft tucked in tight. The other flights join. The squadron assembles. Then you join with other squadrons. The fighter group comes together. 48 Mustangs flying in formation. It's beautiful and deadly. You head across the channel. Climb to altitude. 20,000 feet. 25,000. The temperature drops. Your heated suit keeps you warm, barely. You're on oxygen now. Can't breathe without it up here. You scan the sky constantly. Above, below, behind. Check your 6, your tail. German fighters love to dive from above, from out of the sun. Hit you before you know they're there. Don't give them that chance. You cross into France. Still climbing. 30,000 feet now. You can see forever. The land is brown and green and scarred by war. You can see other formations. Bombers ahead. Other fighter groups. It's a massive aerial armada. Hundreds of bombers. Hundreds of fighters. The sky is full of aircraft. It's simultaneously awe-inspiring and terrifying. You spot the bombers. B-17s. Flying in combat box formations. Contrails streaming behind them. You take up escort position. Flying slightly above and to the side. Weaving gently to match their slower speed. The bombers cruise at about 180 miles/hour. The Mustang wants to fly faster. You have to S-turn, weave back and forth, to stay with them. It uses more fuel, but keeps you in position. And then you wait. Watch, scan. The Germans will come. They always come. The question is when, and from where. You listen to the radio. Calls from other groups. Bandits, 10 o'clock high. German fighters approaching. Your adrenaline spikes. You tighten your grip on the stick. Check your gun switch. Armed. Ready. There. 12 o'clock level. Your flight leader spots them. Me-109s. A swarm. 4 aircraft in loose formation. They're angling toward the bombers. Your flight leader. Blue flight, take them. Go. You drop your tanks, pull the handle. The paper tanks fall away. You're suddenly light, maneuverable. The Mustang leaps forward as you advance the throttle. War emergency power. The Merlin screams. You're accelerating, diving slightly to pick up speed. The 109s see you coming. They turn toward you. Head-on pass. This is where nerve matters. You're closing at over 600 mph combined speed. You have seconds to aim, fire, react. The 109s open fire. You see their guns winking. Tracers arc toward you. You aim carefully, lead the target, squeeze the trigger. Your Mustang shudders as all 6 guns fire. Tracers reach out. You see your rounds hitting. The 109's canopy shatters. Smoke. You flash past each other. No time to watch. Turn hard. Gut-wrenching G-forces. Your vision tunnels. You grunt. Tense your muscles. Force blood to your brain. Can't black out. Can't lose sight. You reverse. Looking for the 109. There. Climbing. Damaged but still flying. You're behind him now. Perfect position. You close. 300 yards. 200. Line up. Fire. Long burst. 50 caliber rounds hammer the 109. Pieces fly off. The engine explodes. The aircraft rolls over, trailing fire. The pilot bails out. Parachute blooms. He's out of the war. You've got your first kill. No time to celebrate. Another 109 behind you. Your wingman calls. Brake right. You snap the stick right. Hard turn. The 109 overshoots. Now you're turning inside him, reversing the situation. You come around, get on his tail. He's diving. You follow. Steeper, faster. The Mustang is faster in a dive. You're gaining. Line up. Fire. He tries to evade. Too late. Your rounds find him. His wing tears off. The aircraft tumbles, disintegrates. Another kill. You pull up. Check your fuel. You've burned a lot in the fight. You're not worried yet, but you're aware. Check the bombers. They're still in formation, heading toward the target. You rejoin the escort. Other Mustangs are still fighting. The sky is full of contrails, smoke trails, tracers. It's chaos and beauty and violence, all mixed together. The bombers reach the target. You're over Germany now, deep. Berlin is ahead. The bombers open their bomb bays. Flak starts, black puffs filling the sky. The bombers have to fly straight and level. They're vulnerable. Your job is to keep fighters away. You scan constantly. More bandits. FW-190s this time. Diving on the bombers. You and your flight intercept. Another dogfight. More maneuvering. More shooting. You get one. Your wingman gets one. The others break off. The bombers drop. You see their bombs falling. Thousands of them. They hit the ground far below. Explosions. Smoke. The target is destroyed. The bombers turn for home. You escort them out. The Germans keep attacking. You keep fighting. More kills. More near misses. One of your squadron mates gets hit. His engine is smoking. He's losing altitude. Calls that he's heading for Switzerland. Neutral territory. He might make it. Or he might go down over Germany and become a POW. Or he might die. You watch him descend until he disappears into the clouds. You don't know his fate. You cross back into friendly territory. Belgium, France, the Channel. Finally, you're low on fuel now. Seriously low. You switch to your reserve tank. You have maybe 30 minutes of fuel left, enough to make it home. Barely. You descend. Call the tower. Request permission to land. You're number 12 in the pattern. You circle. Watch your fuel gauge. Come on. Let the others land. Your turn. Final approach. Gear down. Flaps down. The Mustang settles onto the runway. Touchdown. You're down. You're safe. You've survived another mission. Engine off. You sit in the cockpit for a moment. Hands shaking. Adrenaline crash. You're exhausted. Emotionally drained. You just killed at least 3 men. Maybe 4. You're alive. Your wingman is alive, but one of your squadron is missing. Maybe alive. Maybe dead. You don't know. You climb out. The ground crew swarms your aircraft, counting bullet holes. 10, 15, 20. Your aircraft took hits you didn't even feel. They'll patch them. Have you ready to fly tomorrow? You walk to debriefing. Tell the intelligence officer what you saw, what you shot, what happened. He makes notes. Credits your kills. 3 confirmed. You're an ace after your 10th mission. It's supposed to feel good. It mostly feels empty. You eat. You sleep. You wake up the next day and do it all again. And again. And again. 50 times if you're lucky. If you survive. If you don't get shot down or run out of fuel or collide with another aircraft or get hit by flak or make a mistake that kills you. You fly and you fight and you hope. That's what it's like. That's what those pilots did. Every day. For months. Until the war ended or they died or they completed their tour. And they did it in Mustangs. The little friends. The aircraft that made it possible. The impact of the P-51 Mustang on World War II cannot be overstated. Quantitatively, the numbers are staggering. American Mustang pilots shot down 4,950 enemy aircraft in the European theatre. That's more than any other American fighter. The kill-to-loss ratio is 11-1. For every Mustang lost in air combat, 11 German aircraft are destroyed. That's dominance. That's superiority. That's proof that the Mustang, properly flown, is simply better than anything the Germans have. But the qualitative impact is even more significant. The Mustang made the strategic bombing campaign viable. Without it, the USAF would have been forced to abandon daylight bombing or accept unsustainable losses. Neither option was acceptable. The Mustang saved the campaign, made it possible to hit German industry, German infrastructure, German cities around the clock, made it impossible for Germany to recover from the damage, made it impossible for Germany to sustain their war economy. The destruction of German oil production, for example, is directly attributable to the P-51. By late 1944, Allied bombers, escorted by Mustangs, are hitting German synthetic fuel plants repeatedly. Germany's fuel production drops from 195,000 tons per month in early 1944 to 17,000 tons per month by September. The Luftwaffe is grounded not because they lack aircraft, but because they lack fuel. Tanks can't move, trucks can't run. The German military is paralyzed. The destruction of the German ball-bearing industry, the destruction of aircraft factories, the destruction of rail yards and bridges and transportation networks. All of this is accomplished by bombers escorted by Mustangs. All of this degrades German military capability. All of this brings the war closer to an end. And the Mustangs' contribution to D-Day cannot be ignored. The invasion succeeds partly because the Allies have air superiority. The Luftwaffe cannot interfere effectively. German reinforcements cannot move during daylight. The invasion beaches are protected from air attack. All of this is possible because Mustangs and other Allied fighters have crippled the Luftwaffe, destroyed their aircraft, killed their pilots, forced them into a defensive posture from which they can never recover. The Mustang also saves lives. 30,000 American bomber crew members died during the strategic bombing campaign. It's a horrific number. But it would have been much higher without fighter escort. Much, much higher. The loss rates before the Mustang arrived were unsustainable. If those rates had continued, the entire bomber force might have been destroyed. The Mustang made survival possible, made it possible for bomber crews to complete their tours and go home, made it possible for families to see their sons, brothers, husbands again. From a German perspective, the Mustang is a nightmare. Hermann Göring's quote is famous. "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the war was lost." He's right. The arrival of long-range escort fighters over Germany signals the end. The Luftwaffe's strategy was built on the impossibility of this. When the impossible becomes real, when American fighters appear over the heart of the Reich, the psychological blow is devastating. German morale collapses. The certainty of victory, already shaken by defeats in Russia and North Africa, evaporates completely. They're fighting a losing battle. They know it. The Mustang proves it. German pilots who survived the war later speak about the Mustang with grudging respect and fear. General Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top aces and later commander of German fighter forces, acknowledges that the arrival of the Mustang was decisive. He writes that when P-51s appeared over Germany, the Luftwaffe lost the initiative, lost the ability to dictate terms of engagement, lost the ability to mass forces for effective counterattacks, lost the war in the air. And without air superiority, Germany cannot win. The Mustang continues to serve after World War II. During the Korean War, redesignated F-51, it flies ground attack and close support missions. It's effective in this role. The long range is useful for strikes deep into North Korea. The ruggedness allows it to survive ground fire. The armament is effective against ground targets. It's eventually replaced by jets. But it serves honorably until the transition is complete. Many countries use the Mustang after the war. Over 55 nations operate P-51s at some point. It remains in service until the 1980s with some air forces. The Dominican Republic is the last to retire them. That's 40 years of service. 40 years of proof that the design was sound, the engineering brilliant, the concept revolutionary. Today, about 100 P-51s remain airworthy. They're flown at air shows. maintained by dedicated enthusiasts. These aircraft represent history. They're not just machines, they're symbols of American ingenuity, symbols of industrial might, symbols of the men who flew them and the war they helped win. When you see a P-51 fly, and if you ever get the chance you should, pay attention. Watch how it moves, how graceful it is, how powerful. Listen to the Merlin engine. That distinctive sound, that roar. Imagine what it was like, flying this aircraft into combat, over Germany, over Berlin, facing flak and fighters and death, protecting bombers, shooting down Germans, winning the air war. This aircraft did that, made it possible, changed history. Let's return to March 4th, 1944, to Hermann Göring, looking at reports of American fighters over Berlin, trying to process what this means, trying to understand how this is possible. His engineers told him it was impossible. Physics told him it was impossible. And yet here are the reports. Multiple confirmed sightings. Mustangs over Berlin, escorting bombers, shooting down German fighters, operating as if this is routine, as if 1,600 miles round trip is nothing. Göring's world collapses in this moment, not immediately, not visibly, but psychologically, strategically, this is the end. Everything he's built, everything he's planned, the entire defensive strategy for the Luftwaffe is now obsolete. The Americans can hit any target in Germany, any time, with fighter protection, and Germany cannot stop them. Oh, the Luftwaffe will keep fighting. They'll inflict casualties. They'll shoot down bombers and fighters. They'll make the Americans pay. But it's a losing battle, a war of attrition that Germany cannot win. American production is overwhelming. Thousands of bombers, thousands of fighters, thousands of pilots being trained and sent to Europe to replace losses. The Americans can sustain casualties that would cripple any other nation. Germany cannot match this, cannot compete with this industrial might. The Mustang represents everything that Germany feared about America. Not just military power, industrial capacity, the ability to design, engineer, produce, and deploy weapons in quantities that overwhelm any defense. The ability to solve seemingly impossible technical problems, like how to make a single-engine fighter that can fly 1,600 miles. Through innovation and determination. The ability to wage total war with the full resources of an industrialized nation committed to victory. Germany is fighting Russia in the east, Britain and America in the west. Italy has collapsed. The Allies are landing in France in 3 months. The Eastern Front is collapsing. The war is lost. Göring knows this now. The Mustang over Berlin is just the final proof. The ultimate demonstration that Germany cannot win. But the fighting continues, because surrender is not an option, because Hitler refuses to accept reality, because the Nazi regime will take Germany down with it, rather than admit defeat. Another year of war, another year of bombing, another year of death and destruction. Millions more will die before the end comes. But the end is certain. The Mustang made it certain. There's a broader lesson in the P-51 Mustang story, about innovation, about solving impossible problems, about what's possible when brilliant engineering meets industrial capacity, meets desperate need. In early 1940, when the British first approached North American aviation, nobody believed a world-class fighter could be designed in 120 days. Impossible. Fighter development takes years. Multiple prototypes. Extensive testing. gradual refinement. You can't rush it, can't shortcut the process, except NAA did. They broke every rule, used existing components where possible, designed the airframe from scratch using cutting-edge aerodynamics, worked around the clock, delivered ahead of schedule, proved the impossible was possible. The Allison-powered Mustang was good but limited, unusable at high altitude, a dead end. Most organizations would have accepted this, would have said, well, we tried, it doesn't work for the mission we need, move on. Instead, someone suggested swapping engines. The Merlin. It was a radical idea. Unproven. Risky. It could have failed catastrophically. Could have produced an aircraft that handled poorly or performed worse. But they tried it. And it worked. Spectacularly. Transformed the Mustang from a tactical curiosity into the best fighter of the war. The paper drop tanks. This seems like a small thing. Use paper instead of metal. Save some weight. But it was crucial. The extra fuel capacity, the weight savings, the disposability, all of this contributed to making the impossible range possible. Someone had to have the idea. Someone had to develop the manufacturing process. Someone had to test them and prove they worked. Innovation at every level. This is how problems get solved. Not by accepting limitations. Not by saying it can't be done. By questioning assumptions. By trying new approaches. By combining different technologies in novel ways. By working harder, thinking smarter, refusing to give up. The P-51 Mustang is the result of hundreds of decisions like this, each one small, each one important. Together, they produced an aircraft that changed the war. And this lesson applies beyond World War II, beyond military aviation. In any field, the people who succeed are the ones who refuse to accept that something is impossible, who look at a problem and say, yes, this is hard, but here's how we might solve it. Who are willing to try unconventional solutions. Who learn from failures and iterate. Who keep pushing until they break through. The engineers at North American Aviation did this. They created something the Germans thought was impossible. The pilots who flew the Mustang did this. They pushed the aircraft to its limits and beyond. They developed tactics, refined techniques, learned how to use the Mustang's strengths against the Luftwaffe's weaknesses. They turned a good aircraft into a war-winning weapon through skill and determination. And the result? Air superiority. The destruction of the Luftwaffe. The success of the strategic bombing campaign. The invasion of Europe. The defeat of Nazi Germany. The Mustang didn't win the war alone. Nothing wins a war alone. But it was a crucial piece of the puzzle. Remove the Mustang from history, and the war might have lasted longer, cost more lives, ended differently. That's the power of innovation. That's the power of refusing to accept impossible. Today, the P-51 Mustang is remembered as one of the greatest aircraft ever built. It's in museums worldwide. The Smithsonian, the Imperial War Museum, the National WWII Museum. Restored examples fly at air shows, thrilling crowds with their speed and grace. Books are written about it, documentaries made, models built. It's an icon, a legend, a symbol of American ingenuity and power. But it's important to remember what the Mustang actually was. A tool, a weapon. Built for a specific purpose at a specific time. Designed to kill, used to kill. Thousands of German pilots died because of the Mustang. Thousands of German aircraft were destroyed. That was its job. That was its purpose. It's easy to romanticize, to focus on the elegance of the design, the beauty of the aircraft, the skill of the pilots. But war is not romantic. War is brutal. The Mustang was a tool of war, an effective tool, a necessary tool, perhaps, but a tool of death, nonetheless. The pilots who flew the Mustang understood this. They were not bloodthirsty killers. They were young men doing their duty, protecting their comrades in the bombers, fighting for their country. They took no pleasure in killing. Well, some did. Some were natural predators who loved the hunt. But most were just trying to survive, trying to do their job, trying to end the war and go home. They climbed into their Mustangs and flew into combat because that's what they were ordered to do. And they did it knowing they might not come back. The bomber crews the Mustang protected felt differently. To them, the Mustang was salvation. The little friends who kept them alive, who fought off German fighters, who made it possible to complete missions and return home. The bomber crews loved the Mustang, not the machine, the pilots, the men who flew protection, who risked their lives so the bombers could survive. That bond between bomber crews and fighter pilots was real and deep. They depended on each other, trusted each other. The Mustang pilots knew that if they failed, the bombers died. The bomber crews knew that without the fighters, they were dead. That mutual dependence created respect, gratitude, camaraderie. The Germans who faced the Mustang had a different perspective. To them, it was a deadly adversary, superior to their own fighters in most ways, flown by increasing numbers of well-trained pilots, supported by overwhelming industrial production. The Mustang represented their doom. Some German pilots were skilled enough to fight Mustangs effectively, to get kills despite the odds. But most knew they were overmatched, knew that every encounter with Mustangs was potentially their last. The psychological weight of this was crushing. Knowing you're fighting a losing battle, knowing the enemy is better equipped, knowing you're going to die. Not if, but when. That's what the Mustang meant to the Luftwaffe. Not just a good fighter, a symbol of inevitable defeat. There's one more aspect of the Mustang story worth exploring. The human cost. Not just the obvious cost, the pilots who died, but the broader cost. The emotional cost, the psychological cost, the cost paid by everyone involved. The pilots who survived the war carried their experiences forever. They'd killed men, lots of men, watched aircraft explode, watched parachutes deploy, sometimes watched parachutes fail, watched men die, done it themselves, repeatedly. That changes you. You can't kill people, even enemy combatants in war, without it affecting you psychologically. Some pilots handled it well, compartmentalized, moved on with their lives. Others struggled. Nightmares, flashbacks, guilt, PTSD, though it wasn't called that at the time. They'd just say someone was flak happy or shell-shocked, but it was the same thing. The war left scars, invisible scars that never fully healed. The German pilots faced the same issues, compounded by the fact that they lost. They fought bravely, skillfully, desperately, and lost anyway. Saw their country destroyed. saw their cause revealed as evil, had to live with the knowledge that they fought for the Nazis. That's a burden American pilots didn't have to carry. American pilots came home as heroes. German pilots came home, if they came home at all, to a destroyed country and a legacy of shame. Not their personal shame. Most were just doing their duty, but the collective shame of what Germany had done. What the Nazi regime had been. That's a heavy weight. The ground crews who maintained the Mustangs, these men are often forgotten, but they were crucial. Every aircraft that flew did so because a ground crew worked through the night to make it flyable. Fixing damage, replacing parts, refueling, rearming. It was exhausting, dangerous work. Aircraft were dangerous even on the ground. Propellers could kill you if you weren't careful. Fuel could explode. Ordnance could detonate. The ground crews took these risks daily, and they felt the losses personally when their aircraft didn't come back. When their pilot was killed. That was their plane, their pilot. They'd maintained it, prepared it, sent it into combat. And sometimes it didn't come home. That guilt, wondering if they'd missed something, if they'd made a mistake that got someone killed. That was real. The factory workers who built the Mustangs. Thousands of them. Many were women. This was during the era of Rosie the Riveter, when women entered the workforce in huge numbers to replace men who'd gone to war. They worked long hours in dangerous conditions, building aircraft, one by one, thousands of aircraft. They knew their work mattered, knew that every Mustang they built would save American lives, would kill Germans. That was motivation. But it was also weight. The knowledge that what you're building is a tool of death, that your work, your labor, contributes directly to killing. Most handled it. War creates a different moral calculus, but some struggled with it. And the broader society. America was at war. Total war. Everyone contributed. Everyone sacrificed. Rationing. War bonds. Women working in factories. Men joining the military. Families sending their sons, husbands, brothers to war. Not knowing if they'd come back. Living with that fear, that uncertainty. Reading casualty lists. Hoping your loved one's name isn't on it. This was the reality for millions of Americans during World War II. The Mustang, in a small way, made this easier. Made it possible for more men to come home. Made the war shorter. Made victory possible. But it didn't erase the cost. So what's the final assessment of the P-51 Mustang? How do we summarize its impact, its significance, its legacy? Technically, it was brilliant. One of the best designed aircraft of World War II. Aerodynamically efficient, powerful, long-ranged, well-armed, durable, beautiful. Everything a fighter should be. The engineers who designed it deserve enormous credit. They created something exceptional. Operationally, it was decisive. The Mustang changed the air war over Europe, made strategic bombing viable, achieved air superiority, crippled the Luftwaffe, enabled D-Day, shortened the war, saved lives. The pilots who flew it proved its capabilities in combat. The ground crews who maintained it kept it flying. The doctrine that employed it maximized its effectiveness. All of this combined to create a war-winning weapon. Historically, it's significant. The Mustang is remembered as one of the iconic aircraft of World War II, one of the machines that helped defeat Nazi Germany. It represents American industrial might, technological innovation, and military effectiveness. It's a symbol of the era. When people think of World War II fighters, they think of Spitfires and Mustangs. That's the legacy. But perhaps most importantly, the Mustang represents possibility. The triumph of innovation over limitation. The proof that impossible is often just a lack of imagination. When the British needed fighters, NAA delivered in 120 days. When the Allison engine limited performance, someone suggested the Merlin and transformed the aircraft. When range was insufficient, engineers developed drop tanks and fuel management techniques to extend it. At every stage, problems were solved through creativity and determination. That's the real lesson of the Mustang. Not just that it was a good fighter, that it represents what's possible when talented people refuse to accept limitations. Hermann Göring saw Mustangs over Berlin and knew the war was lost. He was seeing the physical manifestation of American power. Industrial capacity, technical innovation, strategic capability, all embodied in a small, sleek, deadly fighter plane that shouldn't exist, but did. That shouldn't be able to fly to Berlin and back, but could. That shouldn't be able to defeat the Luftwaffe, but did. The Mustang made the impossible routine, made 1,600-mile missions normal, made air superiority achievable, made victory inevitable. That's its legacy. That's why it matters. That's why, 80 years later, we remember the P-51 Mustang. Not just as a good airplane, as the airplane that changed the war. That proved the Germans wrong. That saved American lives. That helped defeat Nazi Germany. When those first Mustangs appeared over Berlin in March 1944, they were more than just fighters. They were proof that America could design, build, and deploy weapons that exceeded German engineering. Proof that the Allies could achieve air superiority. Proof that Nazi Germany could be defeated. Hermann Göring recognized this immediately. The war was lost. The Mustang proved it. And history proved him right. The war continued for another year. But the outcome was never in doubt after March 1944. The Mustang had changed the equation, made Allied victory inevitable. That's the power of one aircraft, one brilliant design, one impossible achievement that became reality. The P-51 Mustang, the little friend, the fighter that could go the distance, the aircraft that the Germans thought was impossible until it appeared over their capital. The plane that changed everything. Remember it. Honor it. Learn from it. Because the Mustang's story is more than just military history. It's a lesson about what's possible when brilliant engineering meets determination, meets necessity. It's proof that problems can be solved, that limitations can be overcome. That impossible is just a word. And sometimes the word is wrong. The Mustang proved it over Berlin. March 4th, 1944. The day the impossible became real. The day Hermann Göring knew the war was lost. The day the P-51 Mustang secured its place in history. Remember that day. Remember that aircraft. Remember what it achieved. Because some machines are more than just machines. Some are history makers. Some change everything. The P-51 Mustang changed everything.